Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. I awoke to the cool breath of dawn sliding through the crack in my window. The air felt damp, touched with the scent of soil after rain. Goose flesh crept along my arms. The blanket had slipped away in the night, pooled in a soft heap on the floor, like something trying to crawl from the room. For a few seconds, I stayed still, half anchored in sleep, listening. The house was silent except for the slow tick of the wall clock and the rustle of leaves outside, leaves that shouldn't have been moving. There was no wind, only the faint scraping sound of something dragging across the lawn, measured and patient, as though it knew I was awake. My eyes drifted to the nightstand. The letter waited there, pale against the wood. The envelope had grown yellow at the edges, its wax seal cracked, but I hadn't been able to throw it away. It had arrived weeks ago with no return address, just my name written in a careful looping hand and a single sentence inside.
When the moon rises full, the gate will open. You must come.
I had tried to forget it, but my dreams never allowed me. Night after night, I saw the same place, endless rows of graves, angel statues turned away from the sky, and a bridge lit by swaying lanterns. Each dream ended with the same whisper pressed against my ear.
Today is the day.
Now the morning light looked bruised, weak, as if the sun had second thoughts about rising. I slid from bed and touched the window pane. Fog rolled across the yard, thick as breath, swallowing the trees one by one until only the gate remained, a shape of black iron and thorns I had never noticed before. Something deep in me shifted. It wasn't fear, not exactly, more like recognition, like the moment you remember a song you've never heard. I dressed without thinking, the letter folded into my pocket, its paper warm against my thigh. By the time I stepped outside, the world had gone perfectly still again. No birds, no breeze, only that waiting silence stretching toward the horizon, and beyond it I could swear I heard the slow groan of metal, as if an unseen hand were pushing open the gate to Ash Rose Cemetery. The iron gate groaned once and drifted inward as if it had been waiting for me. Fog poured through the opening, swallowing my shoes as I crossed the threshold. The instant I stepped inside, the air thickened, damp, mineral, carrying the scent of stone that hasn't felt sun in years. Gravel crunched underfoot. Each step echoed too long, as though the sound had no walls to strike. I turned once to see the road behind me and found nothing. Only the gate, now shut tight, its bars threaded with thorns that hadn't been there moments before. Rows of graves stretched out ahead, each half buried beneath vines. Angel statues leaned at strange angles, their wings furred with moss. Some had no faces at all, just smooth ovals where features should be. I raised my lantern, and a dull orange glow pooled around my hand. The fog shimmered within it like ash suspended in water. Somewhere to my right, a sound began, children laughing, soft and far away. It faded before I could turn, replaced by a hush that felt alive, like the garden itself was listening. My pulse stumbled. I whispered a single word, "Hello," and the fog whispered it back from a dozen directions, each echo slightly wrong. As I moved deeper, the path forked into three. The center trail was lined with small marble lambs, their eyes carved so wide they looked afraid. I chose the left, drawn by the faint flicker of movement beyond the trees. It was there I saw the first wraith. It floated above the ground, thin as smoke, draped in what might once have been burial cloth, its head tilted, boneless, toward my lantern. For a moment it seemed curious, then the light bent around it, drawn away, and the cold struck through my chest like water. I stumbled back, clutching the letter in my pocket, and the wraith dissolved into the fog, leaving only a faint ringing in my ears, the sound of distant bells. When the silence returned, I realized I was standing before a broken sign half buried in ivy. The words were barely legible, scratched by age and claws alike, but I could make out the last line. Caretaker's Row. Somewhere ahead, a shovel hit earth. Shh, thunk. Shh, thunk. Slow. Deliberate. I tightened my grip on the lantern and followed the sound. The candlelight flickered as though it were breathing. I set the letter down, and something shimmered faintly across the paper. Hidden writing surfaced, lines and curls bleeding through like veins under skin. It wasn't ink. It looked like it had been written in soot. 3 marks, 3 paths, 3 hearts that forgot to beat. The map below it showed the cemetery from above, but distorted. The trees bent inward, the paths looping where they shouldn't. Someone had pressed 3 tiny symbols into the paper: a crescent moon, a bleeding heart, and an open eye. The first marked grave lay at the far edge of the garden, where the fog grew so thick it looked alive. When I brushed the dirt away from its headstone, I found an old tin locket lodged in the soil. Inside, a small engraving read, "Only in reflection will the dead reveal what they keep." When I pocketed it, the earth shivered. The gate beside me creaked open on its own. The metallic rhythm guided me through rows of graves that seemed to lean closer the farther I walked. The fog pressed tight around me until I could see no more than a few feet ahead. Every breath tasted of rust and earth. The steady sh-thunk grew louder, paired now with a low hum, a man's voice, tuneless and rough, as though he'd forgotten how songs were supposed to sound. I found him in a small clearing bordered by leaning headstones. An old man stood waist-deep in a half-dug grave, his spine bent, the lantern light catching on strands of white hair. He didn't look up when I spoke. "Sir?" My voice cracked in the thick air. He paused mid-swing, resting his hands on the handle.
"Didn't expect company,"
he said. His tone was calm, but the words wavered as if they came from somewhere else entirely. "I heard you digging," I managed. "I thought—"
"You shouldn't be here."
He straightened slowly. His face was gray beneath the dirt, eyes pale as the fog itself.
"The garden don't take kindly to the living after sundown."
There was a letter," I began, but the look he gave me silenced the rest. His gaze dropped to my pocket, as though he could feel the folded paper there. He climbed out of the grave, boots sinking into the mud, and leaned on his shovel.
Letters have a way of finding their own hands.
he muttered.
Some get burned before they're opened. Some don't.
Behind him, the soil of the open grave began to shift. I thought it was my imagination until the dirt settled into a shape, long, human, perfectly still. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The caretaker didn't notice, or pretended not to.
Every name here needs tending,
He said.
even the ones not carved yet.
Not carved, I whispered. He nodded toward a blank headstone standing beside the pit. My lantern's light washed over smooth marble, except for one faint trace, a single line freshly chiseled. The first letter of my name. I froze.
Best keep moving.
He said, stepping into the fog again, shovel over his shoulder.
The paths don't like hesitation. They close up.
Before I could speak, the mist swallowed him whole. The sound of the shovel faded like a heartbeat drifting away. I turned back to the grave, and the shape in the soil was gone. Only the blank headstone remained, my initial carved deeper than before. The lantern flickered. For a heartbeat, I saw another figure standing at the edge of the clearing, a young man, motionless, watching me. When the light steadied, he was gone. The path narrowed until I could only move single file between walls of marble and ivy. My lantern threw a thin column of light that vanished into fog, revealing shapes that might have been statues or things pretending to be. Somewhere behind me, a bell chimed once, clear and small, like the start of a prayer that no one finished. I followed a ridge that curved uphill and emerged into a courtyard bathed in a wan, colorless glow. Dozens of angel statues ringed the space, each turned toward the ground, wings folded tight as if in mourning. The air here was colder, heavy enough that every breath scraped the inside of my chest. Above them, the moon hung low and distorted, rimmed in crimson haze. At first, nothing moved. Then, as I crossed the circle, the nearest statue exhaled. A thin sigh of dust slipped from its stone lips, trailing through the light. I stepped back, nearly losing my grip on the lantern. On the plinth beneath it, words were etched into the moss-eaten marble.
Raise their eyes and the way will open.
A riddle or a warning, the caretaker's words echoed in my mind.
Every name here needs tending.
I reached out and touched the cold stone. It shuddered faintly under my palm, and a sound like grinding bone filled the air. The statue began to turn inch by inch until its blank face tilted upward toward the moon. The moment it locked into place, light spilled down from the sky, silver and sharp, igniting symbols carved into the ground between the graves. The rest of the angels followed, one by one, their heads creaking, dust raining from their wings. For a heartbeat, the cemetery seemed to breathe again. Then the wraiths arrived. They slipped through the gaps between statues like ink through water, tattered forms drawn to the new light. Their presence pulled the warmth from my body. Frost crept over the lantern glass. I stumbled backward, teeth chattering, as one reached toward my face. Instinct made me raise the letter like a ward. The wraith recoiled, its outline fracturing into static before it vanished in a shriek swallowed by fog. When the last one dissolved, the courtyard fell silent except for the slow grind of stone. The angels stood reborn, all eyes fixed on the moon. A beam of pale light speared the far end of the garden and settled on a great crypt door I hadn't seen before. The seal etched into its surface glowed faintly. An open eye surrounded by roses turned to ash. My fingers trembled around the lantern handle. The air pulsed once, almost like a heartbeat beneath the ground. Somewhere beyond that crypt door, the next secret waited, and though every instinct told me to run, I stepped toward it, drawn by the faintest whisper that seemed to sigh from the light itself. Closer. After the angels turned toward the moon and the crypt's door unsealed, I noticed one of the plinths had cracked. Inside the split stone was something metallic, cold and pulsing faintly with light. It was a heart-shaped charm, rusted nearly black. The moment I touched it, the air around me shifted. Every angel seemed to breathe, releasing a sigh of centuries. A whisper threaded through the fog.
One piece still beats, two yet sleep.
And somewhere beyond the courtyard, I heard the creak of a bridge. The crypt's glow dimmed behind me as I followed the narrow trail that spiraled downward through the mist. The ground turned slick beneath my boots, and every step sent echoes rolling through the hollow garden. I could no longer tell where the fog ended and the earth began. Even the air felt different now, colder, thinner, as if I'd slipped beneath the skin of the world. The trail opened onto a bridge, stretched across a sunken pond, black as oil. Rusted lanterns hung from the ropes along its rail, swaying though there was no wind. Beneath them, shapes drifted just below the surface, too pale, too still. I tightened my grip on the lantern and started across. Halfway over, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, even. I turned, breath held, but the fog was empty. Then, a voice came from the far end of the bridge, low, calm, and close enough to feel the warmth of it.
Careful where you look. Some reflections don't like being seen.
A man stood by the last lantern, its dying flame painting him in fractured light. He looked about my age, his clothes old-fashioned but unblemished, like they'd never touched soil. His eyes caught the glow and held it, almost too steady. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled faintly.
No one remembers names here. It's safer that way.
The wood creaked under my weight. I took another step forward, and his gaze shifted to the letter peeking from my pocket.
You shouldn't have brought that.
"It found me," I said, my voice thin. "Do you know what it means?" He tilted his head.
Letters don't mean. They choose.
Something rippled beneath the bridge, one of the shapes below the surface moving closer. The lanterns flickered in unison, and for an instant I saw faces pressed against the underside of the water, mouths open in silent screams. I stumbled backward, and the young man reached out without moving his feet, his hand stopping inches from mine.
Don't run.
He said softly.
It only listens when you stand still.
What does?
The garden.
His eyes lifted toward the moon.
It's almost awake again. You're further than most ever get.
Before I could ask what that meant, a wraith burst from the water, shrieking like steam through metal. It clawed at the air between us, its outline unraveling in streaks of light. I swung the lantern out of instinct, the glass shattered, and for a moment the whole bridge flared white. When the darkness settled, the wraith was gone, and so was he. Only the nearest lantern remained lit, swaying slowly. Beneath it, a single black rose floated on the water, its petals edged in ash. I picked it up, cold dew running down my wrist, and the faintest whisper drifted through the fog.
When the last petal falls, the keeper will rise.
The stranger's words echoed as I knelt at the bridge's edge.
Some reflections don't like being seen.
I held the broken glass from my lantern over the black water. At first, I saw only the fog and the faint glow of my trembling hand until faces began to surface. They weren't human anymore. Their eyes glowed like dying stars, and their mouths moved soundlessly, forming symbols that burned into the water's surface. 3 runes glimmered faintly, then sank. I looked down and saw the pattern mirrored in the moss along the bridge posts. I traced them with my fingertips, each pulse of light unlocking something unseen. When I finished the final symbol, a faint grinding came from the gate beyond the bridge, and a silver key shaped like an eye emerged from the reflection, rising through the air before falling into my hand. The whisper came again, closer this time.
The garden remembers its keeper.
Inside the crypt, I placed the 3 tokens, the moon, the heart, and the eye, into the altar's carved recesses. The stone trembled under my palms, then split open with a low groan. Light bled from within, faint at first, then blooming outward like fire through fog. The chamber's walls began to pulse with carved veins that seemed to breathe. For a brief, dreadful moment, I felt something take hold of my heartbeat and pull. The rose bled a faint scent of smoke as I carried it from the bridge. Its stem left a gray smear on my palm that wouldn't wash away when I rubbed it against my coat. The fog had grown heavier, tinged now with a dim red pulse from somewhere ahead. Each flare timed with my heartbeat. I followed it, half afraid the garden would swallow me if I stopped. The path widened into a courtyard I hadn't seen before. In the center stood the great crypt whose door I had glimpsed from the angel's circle. Up close, the carvings crawled with detail, roots twisting into shapes of faces, roses turning to flame. The ground trembled faintly underfoot, and the air hummed with a note too low to hear, but strong enough to feel. I pushed the door. It gave easily, opening onto a narrow stairway spiraling downward. My footsteps echoed like knocks on hollow stone. The deeper I went, the colder it became, until my breath hung solid in front of me. At the bottom waited a chamber lit by thin shafts of moonlight filtering through cracks in the ceiling. The murals covered every wall, scenes of the cemetery's creation. A woman kneeling among open graves, an old man planting black roses in urns of ash, a younger figure standing beside him, holding a lantern that burned white instead of gold. Beneath their feet, countless silhouettes writhed within the soil. At the very center of the chamber, set into the floor, was an altar of stone shaped like a closed book. On its surface rested a single petal, black and perfect, glinting with frost. When I touched it, whispers erupted around me, The voices were layered, children's laughter, the caretaker's tune, and the stranger's calm tone woven together. The sound didn't fill the room, it filled me.
Every keeper forgets their beginning.
The air rippled. The young man appeared beside the altar as though he had stepped through the wall. His eyes were darker now, hollow but still kind.
You've done well,
He said.
The garden remembers again.
Remembers what? He looked down at the petal between us. His gaze met mine.
It needed a heart to wake it. Mine's nearly gone.
Realization sank slowly, cold as the air. The carvings on the walls, the faces in the roots, they weren't strangers. They were the echoes of the wraiths of every encounter I'd had, stitched together from guilt and memory. The garden had been feeding on me the entire time, learning my shape. The stranger's voice softened.
When dawn comes, it will choose. One stays, one sleeps.
Before I could speak, he pressed the petal into my palm.
If you hear the shovel, it's already begun.
The chamber shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. He stepped back into the darkness, fading like breath on glass. Somewhere above, I heard the faint, steady thunk of the caretaker's spade. By the time I reached the surface, dawn was only a suggestion, thin gray light trying to break through a sky still strangled by fog. The air was different now. The whispers were quieter, but not gone. They breathed under the earth, waiting. The caretaker stood by the gate, his shovel buried halfway in the soil. He wasn't digging anymore. He was listening. His back was to me, his shoulders hunched as though he carried centuries in them.
You made it further than most,
he said without turning.
But you know how this ends.
I held the petal he'd warned me about. It had melted in my palm, leaving a dark bloom in my skin that pulsed like a second heartbeat. The stranger said the garden needed a heart, I whispered. Was that what this was? He gave a dry chuckle that rattled like leaves in a grave.
Every garden needs one, someone to remember what it was meant to keep.
The fog parted slightly, revealing the path I'd taken. The angels stood motionless, their faces turned skyward, but something had changed. Their eyes weren't empty anymore. They glowed faintly, the color of ash catching light. The caretaker turned then, his eyes hollow pits.
It's hungry again. It always will be. You woke it. You'll tend it.
The ground beneath my feet throbbed like a pulse. I looked down and saw roots, gray, vein-like tendrils creeping from the soil, wrapping gently around my boots. The letter in my pocket began to smolder. I pulled it out, but before I could drop it, it unfolded on its own. My handwriting filled the page.
To whoever finds this, the garden remembers what you've forgotten. It keeps what we leave behind.
The paper dissolved into ash that clung to my fingers. The caretaker's voice drifted through the fog, fading with each word.
Welcome home, Keeper.
I felt the last of the warmth leave me, replaced by a calm so complete it was almost holy. The statues' faces shifted slightly, their eyes closing one by one. The fog thickened, curling inward like smoke, and when I looked down again, my hands were no longer my own. They were stone. Cold, still, unyielding. But somewhere deep beneath, the garden breathed. Epilogue. The fog never truly lifted. It only learned to sleep. Weeks passed before anyone came near Ash Rose Cemetery again. The townsfolk said the fog was poisonous, that it whispered if you stood too close to the fence. But on the first night of the new moon, a small sound broke the silence. Metal grinding against stone. The front gate, sealed for decades, creaked open just wide enough to let the wind through. A young man stood outside, a lantern in one hand, a folded paper in the other. The envelope was gray with ash, the wax seal cracked down the center. His name was written across the front in looping black ink. He frowned at it.
I don't remember this being delivered.
The air was still, but a petal, black as soot, edges glowing faintly red, floated from nowhere and landed at his feet. When he bent to pick it up, the gate swung wider. Inside the cemetery, every statue had turned to face the path. Their stone eyes reflected the faintest shimmer of moonlight, guiding him inward. He hesitated, glanced back toward the sleeping town, then unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate.
When the moon rises full, the gate will open. You must come.
He looked up, heart beginning to pound. Far beyond the fog, a single lantern flickered in answer. The garden was awake again,